The salt was supposed to keep the dead buried. For 2 centuries, the ruins of Carthage had been a silent monument to Roman vengeance, a scorched graveyard where nothing was meant to grow, let alone breathe. But we were greedy. We weren't content with the memory of victory, we wanted the secrets hidden beneath the dust. I am Titus Flavius Aquila, and I have spent my life digging in the parched earth of North Africa, seeking the treasures of a fallen empire. We thought we were unearthing Punic gold. We didn't realize we were digging into the ribcage of a god that fell from the stars long before Dido ever stepped onto these shores. The morning the earth broke, the heat was a physical weight, pressing the breath from our lungs. We had reached the seventh stratum, a layer of stone that didn't look like limestone or marble. It was black, smooth and colder than a Gallic winter. Titus? The picks. They're melting. I turned to see Lucius, our lead engineer, staring at his bronze tool. It wasn't melting from heat, it was being consumed. A silver, liquid-like substance was flowing up the handle, turning the bronze into a dull, gray slurry. The substance didn't drip, it vibrated. It was a swarm of 1 billion tiny metallic insects, a metal virus that had been waiting in the dark for a heartbeat to follow. Then the ground groaned, a deep, tectonic sob that shook the very foundations of the Roman camp. The black floor of the excavation pit split open, revealing a chamber filled with dead stars, massive, pulsing obsidian spheres that hummed with a subsonic frequency that made my teeth rattle. Evacuate the trenches. Fall back to the ridge. I roared, but the command was swallowed by the first eruption. From the black spheres, the mercury husks emerged. They weren't soldiers. They were the remains of the workers who had been standing on the seventh stratum. Their skin had been replaced by a shimmering liquid silver. Their eyes were no longer human, but glowing violet slits of machine logic. They moved with a terrifying nonlinear grace, their limbs elongating into jagged blades of living metal. Formed the line. Shields out. The Third Legion, the survivors of the Numidian campaigns, scrambled into a defensive arc at the edge of the pit. They raised their scuda, but the silver virus didn't care for Roman plywood. As the mercury husks slammed into the line, the silver liquid jumped from their bodies onto our shields. I watched in horror as a heavy Roman shield dissolved in seconds, the iron boss turning into a swarm of gray dust that flew into the legionary's face. The man didn't even have time to scream. The silver dust entered his mouth and eyes, and within 3 heartbeats he was standing still, his skin turning to mercury, his sword fusing to his arm. He turned and drove his new metallic blade through the man behind him. They are turning us into the enemy. Fall back. I sprinted toward the supply tents, my boots kicking up clouds of parched North African dust. My own shoulder felt cold. I looked down to see a thin vein of silver crawling up my larica segmentata. It was eating the iron, moving toward my neck. I didn't hesitate. I drew my gladius and used the hilt to bash the infected plate off my shoulder, the metal snapping like dry glass. Lucius, the starfire. Is it ready? Lucius was standing by a heavy stone siphon, his hands shaking as he adjusted the brass nozzles. We had been experimenting with a mixture of Syrian naphtha and the blue salts we'd found in a crashed scout ship months ago. We called it Starfire, a flame that burned cold and blue, capable of shattering the alien obsidian. The pressure is low, Titus. The virus is in the gears. I grabbed a ceramic jar of the unrefined mixture. It was heavy, pulsing with a faint blue light. Behind us, the excavation pit had become a fountain of silver. Thousands of mercury husks were crawling out of the dark, a silent, shimmering army that was turning the Roman camp into a graveyard of chrome statues. I'll buy you the time. Open the valves when I hit the core. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and ran back toward the abyss. Every step was a gamble. The air was thick with the gray dust of the virus, a metallic fog that tasted of copper and death. A mercury husk lunged from the shadows of a fallen crane, its arm extended into a 6-foot silver spear. I dove beneath the strike, the heat of the alien energy singeing my hair, and drove my gladius into its thigh. The steel didn't cut. It sparked, but it was enough to trip the creature. I reached the edge of the pit. Below me, in the heart of the black vault, the primary source seed, an obsidian sphere the size of a villa, was beginning to glow with a terrifying rhythmic violet light. It was the heart of the virus, the signal tower that was orchestrating the transformation of my men. For Rome. For the earth. I leaped into the pit. For a heartbeat, I was suspended in the golden desert light, a lone red silhouette against the blue glow of the vault. I hit a pile of rubble 20 feet down, my knees screaming in protest, and scrambled toward the source seed. The mercury husks were everywhere. They didn't attack me with blades, they tried to touch me to pass the silver infection into my blood. I swung the ceramic jar like a club, shattering the faceplates of the silver monsters as I fought my way toward the core. My vision was blurring, the gray dust beginning to coat my lungs. I could feel the coldness spreading through my limbs. I reached the source seat. The obsidian surface was warm, vibrating with a sound that felt like 1,000 bees inside my brain. I could see the reflection of my own face in the black glass. My skin was already turning gray, the virus winning the battle for my flesh. I struck the igniter on the jar. Lucius, now. I hurled the jar into the central iris of the source seed. At the same moment, the stone siphon at the top of the trench roared to life. A stream of brilliant blue starfire lanced down from the ridge, hitting the core exactly as the ceramic jar shattered. The reaction was a supernova. The blue flame didn't just burn, it triggered a terminal overload in the alien core. The obsidian sphere cracked, and for a second, I saw the heart of a dead star, a swirling vortex of white and violet fire that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. The pressure wave was absolute. It swept through the vault, vaporizing the gray dust and turning the mercury husks back into inert piles of cooling silver slag. I was thrown backward by the shock wave, slamming into the limestone wall of the trench. The world went white, then black, then a dull, aching red. When I opened my eyes, the silence was louder than the explosion. The violet light was gone. The source seed was a smoking ruin of shattered glass and dead circuitry. The excavation pit was filled with the statues of my men, no longer living, no longer silver, just gray, frozen monuments to a war that shouldn't have happened. I looked at my hand. The silver veins were gone, the virus killed by the intense blue radiation of the starfire. My skin was burnt, my armor was a melted wreck, but I was still meat and bone. I was still human. I pulled myself up the side of the trench, my fingers bleeding as I gripped the scorched stone. I reached the surface and looked out over the ruins of Carthage. The Roman camp was gone. The legion was gone. Only Lucius and a handful of survivors remained on the ridge, staring at the smoking crater with eyes that would never be young again. We didn't find Punic gold. We found the end of the world and we buried it under a layer of blue ash. I took off my helmet and dropped it into the dust. It made a hollow, heavy sound, the last sound of a Roman soldier in a land that had seen the death of gods. I looked at the horizon where the African sun was setting, a deep, natural orange that had nothing to do with the stars. The desert is quiet now. The salt is no longer needed, for the fire has cleansed the earth. We didn't save the empire and we didn't save the city. We only saved the dirt. I turned away from the ruins and began the long walk toward the coast. There were no more orders to give and no more borders to defend. Carthage was truly dead this time, and as the first real stars of the evening appeared in the cooling sky, I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on the sand, on the honest, warm earth that had almost been replaced by the cold, eternal silver. The wind carries the ash into the deep desert, and the history of the ninth is written in the smoke. We are the ones who stayed, the ones who saw the dead stars wake and put them back to sleep. The silence of the ruins is our only reward, and the warmth of the sun is our only glory. The earth is heavy. The fire is spent. The dust is still. I walk until the shadow of the Pharos is a memory, and the salt of the sea is the only thing I can taste. Carthage remains a scar, and I am the ghost who walks it. The end is not a roar, it is the soft, rhythmic sound of a man walking home through the sand. The night is long and the stars are silent. The earth belongs to the living once more.